destroy. Arise, awake, destroy. Arise, awake, destroy. Arise, awake, destroy. Arise, awake, destroy.
Hey, Michael, how the hell are you?
Excellent. How you doing, brother?
I'm hanging in there. I'm hanging in there. I gotta say, this is awesome to talk to you because I was always one of those like huge Blood Circus fans, right?
Excellent.
And
Excellent.
yeah, and to me it seemed, especially at the time, that there were, you know, tens of thousands of us, like, all over. But every time I talk to somebody from Sub Pop or whatnot, they're like, "Oh, it's a worst selling album of all time," like blah, whatever. And I was like, but people filled the shows, man, and they liked it, you know.
Well, that's kind of a misnomer because we were the worst selling band that they thought was going to sell a ton of records. So
Right.
when it boils down to it, we were in the upper mid range, but the Sub Pop thing was awesome fun, and I enjoyed being on their label,
Hmm.
and yeah, it was great.
So was Blood Circus your first band, or was it because you guys were a little bit older? I mean, just
Yeah.
slightly, than the other bands.
Well, I'd come from Denver, and I was in bands in Denver long before I got to Seattle. Recording bands. My band Blood Circus or Dog Meat recorded some music that was real fun, pretty groundbreaking for the time. And the music scene in Denver has always been strong.
Right. Well, I kind of see Denver as a weird sister city to Seattle, right? I mean, it's
Yeah.
different in a lot of ways, but there's a lot of similarities too,
Well, a
So
lot of crossovers, so a lot of bands from Denver go back and forth to Seattle. I mean, the Derelicts are mostly a Denver band, and the Fluid are a Denver band, but we're associated with Seattle a lot.
I like to call the Fluid the best band from Seattle that's not from Seattle.
Right.
I mean, I love them to death. Like
Yeah,
I wish they had gone way further than they did.
and they should have.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But again, they kind of had, to a certain extent, the same sort of sensibilities that Blood Circus had, right? It was very heavy, but without the kind of homage to Black Sabbath, right? I mean, it was heavy, heavy, heavy music, right?
Well, the Fluid, they're my great buddies. We grew up together, and definitely we all played a bunch of bands together. I was in White Trash for a while with half the guys from the Fluid long before the Fluid was around. And we were all good buddies, so we were playing the same types of music for a long time. So there's a lot of crossover for Denver and Seattle.
Absolutely. So, did you guys migrate to Seattle together from Denver, or was it kind of a gradual thing?
No, I came. Linda Dershang, who owns all the bars in Seattle, is my
Mhm.
ex-wife, and she owned a
Oh,
clothing store called Basic. So we moved from Denver to Seattle so she could open the store and so I could play music up there.
wow. Okay. Well, that's a tie-in I didn't know existed. Um,
I don't
so,
talk about
hell, I mean, I have two ex-wives, so I'm right there with you. I don't talk about them either. Um, but but I have to ask one question before we move on. Did you move here? Did you meet her before or after you moved here? Like, was that an
it.
impetus or?
Me and Linda were, I actually was friends with her brother. We were sports team players in the same leagues and stuff, and we were friends. And I met her later on during the punk rock days when she owned Fashion Disaster here in
Wow.
Denver.
So I have to ask, what sports?
Hockey,
Oh, hockey. Huh.
yeah. Hockey, I
Wow.
played football, but I wasn't big enough, but I was pretty competitive at hockey.
Right. I mean, first of all, for those who don't know, like who Blood Circus was, you were the first band signed on some first or second? Like you were right at the very beginning of the bands that were signed
Yeah,
on.
we were at the beginning. Our first single came out, Sub Pop 13, and most of the bands before that were bands that let's see, Bruce had worked with via Olympia. So we were
Oh,
we were
right.
definitely one of the first ones. I wouldn't say we were the first though.
Right. Um,
No.
maybe it was the first full length or something like that. There is a first you have somewhere, and I'm missing what it is right now.
Yeah.
Um, so you'd been in a bunch of bands in Denver. You met somebody. You ended up migrating to Seattle. What
Yeah.
did you think of Seattle when you first got here? Like when you were checking out like the music scene?
We came out on vacation to visit to see if it would be a good place for Linda to open her clothing store, and we had a great time. We went in the springtime, and we just lucked out and had beautiful weather, and didn't realize that it rained all the time. So we were hooked as soon as we got there,
Mm-hmm.
and she did real well in the clothing business, and I enjoyed it a lot too. Made a lot of money as a chef and as a carpenter. So
Mm-hmm.
it's always been a fruitful place for me.
Right. So I have to ask this question now. Like, where did you where were you a chef? Like, where did you cook in Seattle?
In Seattle, I worked at Cafe Sport.
Mm-hmm.
I was executive chef at Testarossa on Broadway.
Nice.
I was the culinary director at Moe's Moroccan Cafe,
Wow.
and lots of places.
No, that's fun. That's fun.
Yeah,
Um, I'm asking because there's a very small community of both music and restaurant workers in Seattle, right? And the overlap is huge. So I was curious to
oh,
see
yeah.
what sort of overlap.
And it was then too. Uh,
Yeah.
Lots of people in those days, and it was good for being able to go on tours. You could in the restaurant business was pretty fluid, so you could tell them I'm going to be gone for a week, and they wouldn't get all bent out of shape.
Right.
So yeah, that worked out great. I liked it.
Yeah. I'm I'm not saying you did this, but I'm reminded of a friend of mine who worked at Michelli's in the early 80s,
Yeah,
83, 84, something like that. And he would tell these stories of walking in because he always worked the graveyard shift, right? So he'd
yeah,
walk in and there'd be a lineup of everyone who worked that night waiting to get like whatever their drug of choice was, like whether it was
yeah,
methadone or whatever. Like literally everyone lining up being like, fuck, we've got 8 hours to deal with a bunch of drunken assholes, right?
yeah.
And
Right.
so we're gonna get, take our drug of choice, to just deal with it, right?
Yeah. Oh, the
And
restaurant business
Michelli's
was
was kind
full
of a
of
magical
those.
place.
Cocaine was all over the restaurant business.
Oh hell yeah,
Right, right.
yeah, and lots of
Oh, the good
methadone
old
too.
days.
And actually it's funny. I don't want to dive into the drug scene too much, but I spent a lot of time out and about in Seattle, and I personally, and I realize I'm an anomaly, didn't see a huge amount of heroin. I saw a bunch of blow, a bunch of meth, a bunch of designer drugs. um I knew people who did the heroin stuff, and
Right,
opiates of whatever kind, but
right.
it I didn't see it like in front of me, right? I just knew it was there, but it wasn't, you know, whatever. And when I talk to some other people I know, they're like, "Are you fucking stupid?" Like, I mean, people were nodding off all over the place, and I didn't fucking know. I
Right.
didn't even
Well,
notice it.
that community keeps to itself pretty much. They're not flamboyant about spreading it around. And we all knew that those guys were doing dope, but I personally wasn't involved in that at all. I had dabbled in dope, but that was long before I got to Seattle.
Yeah, I I personally don't like it. I don't like the feeling of it.
Right.
It's a very good friend of mine said, and it's funny, I always get some quote from him on every single podcast I do, but is, yeah, the one time I did heroin, my body felt tiny, my head felt huge, and I felt like I was going to fall down. And I was like, yeah,
Yeah.
that's, I don't understand why people want to feel that way. Like it
No,
sounds horrible to me.
a lot of people are crushing their egos and the bad feelings they have with it. It's a way to become completely numb and not have to deal with your feelings or whatever it is that drew you to having to get so shit faced.
Right. So, but okay, so here's a segue here. You obviously like your weed.
Yes, I do.
Okay. So for me, I'm one of those people that the majority of drugs tend to affect me about the same way, right? It literally doesn't matter if I do, a bunch of blow or I smoke a bunch of weed or drink a bunch of booze. In the end, the effect is generally the same for me. All right.
Really.
Yeah. That's until recently, but we'll get to that in just a second, right?
Right.
Um, so I've never gotten that like, oh, I need to feel a certain way, so I'm gonna, do some blow, or I want to feel another way, and I want to do some opiates or whatever. For me, it's all the same. And what I realized is it's because I used alcohol as the great continuator
Right.
between everything. So it didn't really matter. Like,
Yeah, because you were drunk.
yeah, if you're super drunk and you do some heroin, yeah, you're gonna feel it a little bit more. And if you do blow, it's gonna kind of take the edge off a little bit. But honestly, you end up kind of feeling the same way, which
Yeah.
is discombobulated,
Yeah.
you know.
Right.
And it's only in the last year, I would say, that I've ever smoked cannabis without being drunk. And it's a great high, man. I
It's
mean, I
a
like
whole
it.
different world, isn't it?
Yeah, I like it. Other than getting hungry all the time.
Well, you'll get over that.
Right. So let me ask you a couple questions because, like I said, I'm still like a cannabis neophyte. Um, what? Oh, okay. So one thing that I've noticed is that I forget which is which, but indica and sativa affect me the opposite ways they're supposed to affect. Right. So they're like one makes you sleepy and one doesn't.
Right.
They affect me the
One
exact
is supposed to
opposite.
have a thicker buzz than the other, but realistically, I don't know that it really makes that much difference. From my experience, and I have a lot of it, I smoke both, and I get high off of both. I suppose the indicas are a little thicker, but the amount that I smoke, it really doesn't make any difference.
Oh, that's interesting. So I'm actually looking at a package that I have right now, and it's a oh, it's a blend. That's probably why.
Hmm.
And the whole fact that you and I can sit here and talk about, legally buying weed and having a package of it is kind of amazing, right?
Definitely.
I mean, did you think? Because I certainly didn't. Did you think you would reach the day where you could be like, oh, I can go in a store and buy whatever I want?
I had always hoped in the 70s when Jimmy Carter was president, it was looking like we might be able to have such a thing, but then the Reagan came and crushed everything.
Right.
But it's pretty amazing. I'm not really big on going to the dispensaries because the weed is usually pretty mid-level, but
Hmm.
it's a really nice convenience when you're on vacation in Washington or Oregon, and you don't have to take anything with you and risk a jail sentence. You can just
True.
go to a dispensary there, and I like that.
So the one thing that I found is, again, neophyte in terms of weed, like I would smoke it every once in a while or whatever, is finding um the extracts, right? The tinctures and whatnot. I really loved the shit
Right?
out of those. you know?
Yeah, they're my favorites too.
Yeah, and again, because I'm the way I am, I would, you know, I would get a like an orange tincture and I would use it in a vodka soda, right?
Yeah,
And so I
right,
never actually got the real effect of the weed I do or the cannabis. It would be um, over the top of the booze.
right.
And anyway, I'm glad I finally discovered what it's like to do it without the booze because it's a very clean sort of high. You know.
Right. The tinctures, I make a really good tincture that I hardly smoke anymore at all. The tincture just works so well. I don't even think about really smoking that much. So I think it's a lot better for me. I have a bad pancreas, so I think it's better to get the THC and the CBDs directly to my stomach for health reasons. So I'm digging the tinctures myself.
Yeah, I think they're great. What about like pure CBD? Do you use any of that?
No, I'm kind of the same school as Rick Simpson, who invented the RSO oil, that it needs to have at least a little bit of THC to make the CBD functional. I know a lot
Mm-hmm.
of people swear by straight up CBD, but I think that a lot of that stuff is snake oil.
So I don't know when the last time you've been in Seattle, um, but right now you can go to coffee stands. I live in Edmonds for fuck's sake, right? Which is about as white bread as you can possibly be. And the espresso stands around here have CBD add $5 a shot. So they're literally like pouring
Yeah.
CBD into their espresso.
I'm not
And it's
sure. I suppose there's something to it, and medical people say there are. So, yeah, who's to say you shouldn't? I don't, but other people who do, I go for it.
yeah. I mean, I, it's funny. I have a good friend of mine who does like he's like scientifically into all the various strains and all that stuff, and trying to get him on the show.
Right.
But as you can imagine, he's very busy right now. Like trying to get everyone their
Yeah.
the right cannabinoids or whatnot. Um, I personally I don't know. Like I all I know is one time I was supposed to get like an 80% CBD, 20% THC mix, and they fucked it up, and I ended up with an 80% THC and 20% CBD mix, and I had a really good time that night.
So this was a tincture that you're talking about?
Yeah, it was a tincture. Um, and I
Right.
had no idea what I was doing. I was just like, oh yeah, no, I want like, an 80/20, and they just got it backwards. And yeah, I, I had a very, very, very good night because, like I said, I just mixed it in my vodka soda, right? And it was like, oh yeah,
Right.
orange. Drank it down and, you know, full on body high, freak out, for like 3 or 4 hours. So yeah, I'm not the best in that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
you're originally,
it happens.
yeah, no, fuck. Knock on
I've
wood.
had a few. Go ahead.
I was gonna say knock on wood. It hasn't happened for a few months with me, but those body highs can be brutal.
Yeah, debilitating.
Yeah.
Though it won't kill you, but it feels like it's going to kill you. I've had space cakes in Holland that
Oh
would
God,
put
yeah.
you on the couch and you're sure you're going to die. But a couple hours later you come back and everything's fine. No one's ever died from weed.
Right. I. So it's funny you say that because I'm one of those people that continually have the death trips, right? Like I just
Mm.
always the death trips, and I've just gotten used to them at this point. Um,
Yeah,
so my last night I did the same thing. I was mixing, some smoking with some edibles with a joint I had rolled, right? So it was like, pipe, joint to, edibles. And the heart starts like, oh my God, it's so tight in the chest, like, uh-oh.
Uh, right.
And I was like, oh wait,
Uh-oh,
this
Whitey's
happens
coming.
every time.
Right. Yeah. Anxiety. So you got to watch that. Got to take it easy. But you can be glad to know that it'll never kill you.
Yeah, to be honest, it's the one drug I've never worried about, right? Like,
Right.
I worry way more about, the alcohol I drink,
Right.
than the weed I smoke. Um,
Mm,
but I do worry about the effects, meaning that if you're not, at least for me, if I'm not completely mentally there and aware, then I can go down a rabbit hole that potentially I could do something stupid, right? And I'm not talking about
right.
killing myself or anything like that. Just calling 911. Like, oh, I'm having a heart attack. I'm like, no, you're not.
Right.
You're just really high.
Mm. And you say you prefer the sativas to the indicas because you're more likely to have uh, what we call a whitey, which is the panic attack, and it's not really an overdose, but it's you've had too much. So I guess it
Right.
is an overdose,
Yeah.
and it's usually is because of a sugar drop.
Oh,
So they
really?
tell you in Amsterdam to drink a Coke if you're starting to feel like you're having a whitey.
Huh. Well, that's actually good to know because I'm mildly diabetic on top of it, so that actually makes a lot
Could
of
very well
sense.
be why you have issues with it.
Yeah. That's interesting. Um, but again, like I've for years I would do, like I was one of those guys that once a week I'd buy a sheet of acid and I'd do, and my whole goal was to sell three-quarters of it, right? So I'd buy it, and like 3 days later I'd done half of it, and then
Yeah,
give away the other 50, you know.
right.
Um, but that didn't have the same effect on me as cannabinoids. So cannabinoids seem to have a radically different effect, and like I said, I'm, you know 50 now, or almost 50, um, and it's taken me 40 years to get to the point where I can actually do that stuff and not lose my fucking mind,
Right.
right?
Well,
But
that the
I could,
cannabinoids is all about that. You know, you're that's what I do in my seed uh, research is that I'm searching for different cannabinoid profiles for certain aspects. Now, the sativa and indica, I don't know that that makes a giant difference, but I know that the cannabinoid profiles make a big difference on how the high comes out and what the benefits are.
right. So let's talk a little bit about your research into that stuff. Um, so and I realize we're in kind of weird ground here. So, I'm going to be a little bit careful, but on a personal level, when you're researching this stuff, um, do you take like chemistry into account? Like, how do you experiment with various strains and seeds and whatnot?
It's all personal experience. I go for searching for something that would be good for pain. So I'm as an old guy, I've got plenty of pain, so I just do the different blendings of different varieties to create different things, and it takes years to develop different
Hmm.
varieties. So it's it's an act of love, and
So,
I've just loved it. It's been a hobby of mine for 30 plus years.
so what you're saying reminds me of like Albert Hoffman, right? When he was doing his experiments and eventually found LSD. Um, and he wasn't doing it for physical pain anyway. He was definitely for mental pain though. Um,
Right.
and doing all this experimentation. Um, Can you lower your phone just a tiny bit? Because all I can see,
Sure.
there you
Oh,
go.
sorry.
Sorry, all,
There we go.
all
I
we could see
wasn't
was
paying
your
attention.
nose. All better. Um, yeah, it's that personal reaching for something that I think brings a lot of that interesting sort of research into drugs and their effects and whatnot that eventually have a greater public good, right?
Right.
Yeah,
Uh, yeah, that was the concept of it when we started doing all the medical work back in the old days
right.
to make it legal for medical use. You know, it's definitely has a medical value, and the drug companies just didn't want that to happen at all.
No, they really don't. Although now they're slowly kind of coming around. Like I've
Right.
seen a couple of um, indicators that companies like Bear or whatnot are kind of leaning towards, like I always say the word wrong. I
Yeah.
always say cannabinoids, but it's cannabinoids.
Cannabinoids.
Yeah, sorry.
Right.
Um, and especially with like CBD and whatnot. So again, it's a lot of
Right.
people are getting excited about that. Um, but it would require the drug companies to lose a lot of fucking money.
Yeah. Well, they're starting to realize they're losing money anyway because it's good medicine. So
Right?
they're starting to get into the research. You know, it took it for it to become legalized before they decided they would get into it. They should have been into it 40 years ago.
Hmm. No, I mean, the thing is, I'm sure they were. They just,
Could very well be, yeah.
yeah, they had done the research. They'd realized that they were in trouble, and started moving towards, like, well, the opioids. I mean, that's when they really, synthetic opioids, right? Um,
Right.
that's when they really started to take off, you know?
Yeah. Easier to
Um,
control than addiction.
yeah. And, let's be honest. I mean, some of these opioids they're fantastic, which is what's terrifying about them,
Right.
you know? Like
Yeah.
popping an oxy, you're like, okay, I feel
Yeah.
really fucking good for like 8 hours.
Right. When I was in the hospital, the fentanyl was phenomenal.
Yeah, yeah.
But that you don't want that to get into the hands of regular people.
No, you don't. And you know, right now, I don't know what Colorado is doing right now, but um, Washington State, we're actually working on a statewide, basically, personal use thing for basically any drug,
Right.
right? And Seattle's been that way for a while. Seattle, basically 3 grams of anything is basically, slap on the wrist. Like you
Right.
don't get arrested
As
for
it
it.
should be.
Yeah. In fact, I like to joke with my friends, like Seattle's the only city in the world where, an 8 ball is 3 grams because that's the legal amount, right? So nobody's going to sell you
Yeah.
a full 8 ball. It's always just 3 grams. Um,
It's been a long time.
well, that's good, and it should be because, the reason that I started bringing that up is the whole fentanyl thing, right? And there's people are using fentanyl to enhance drugs that have no business having fentanyl in them. Like
Right. And it's
cocaine.
very strong. It's very easy to die from.
Yeah, exactly.
Mm.
And people are putting, fentanyl in, cocaine. They're putting it in other words, drugs that people who do it would have zero tolerance for fentanyl, right? So they have
Right.
no opioid tolerance at all.
Right.
And
And
it's
if you
scary
put
shit.
fentanyl in cocaine, people who are on a cocaine bender will do a lot. So that can be very dangerous. Yeah, don't
Yeah.
put that in cocaine.
Exactly. And it only takes, a few grains here and there of fentanyl. So, it's like, and actually I've seen a few people die in the last couple of years about, with that. Um,
Yeah,
because they'll do like an 8 ball or whatever over a weekend. So, a fair amount, but nothing, too fucking crazy.
right.
Um, but there happens to be, 5 or 6 grains of fentanyl, spread out through that 8 ball, and it like adds up, and yeah, they OD,
Right.
and that's terrifying. Um, th this kind of brings me back to like the legal weed thing. Um, and you can feel free to ignore this question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Um, if weed is legal, and at least in Washington, California, um, Colorado, basically the West Coast guys, right? Um, we've done a pretty good job of making sure that it's controlled. Actually, maybe too much, from
Yeah,
farm to consumer.
right.
Um, do you think that some same sort of infrastructure could work for, fuck, who knows? Cocaine, could it work for heroin? Could it work for?
Well, the thing about it is that people who do hard drugs are going to do the hard drugs, and they know where to get
Hmm.
them. So I don't think that if it was legal, whether that would be less. I think it would be better to have a controlled chain for the drugs, so that people would be more likely to get help and more likely to have cleaner drugs to do, so they're not going to have as many ODs because it'll be a controlled circumstance.
Hmm.
Uh, People are going to do what they want. Drugs should be legal.
Okay. I mean,
Yeah,
I think that's a valid point.
yeah. I know
Um,
lots of people aren't into that concept, but realistically, if we want to help the people that are drug addicts, keeping them in jail isn't the way to do it.
no, definitely not. I mean, there's a very easy reason behind that, right? So
Right,
if you're in jail, so you have a serious, heroin habit, whatever. You go into jail. They throw you in for 15 days, 30 days, whatever. So you essentially detox. You go out, and what is the first thing you do? You do that shot that's, what you used to do, and probably a little bit higher than what you used to do because you want to get super fucked up, and it
right,
kills you,
right.
because your
It
tolerance is
happens
gone.
all the time.
Yeah. Um, so I'm not like a cheerleader for legalization per se, but I am a cheerleader for understanding why things are the way they are, right?
Right,
And why people are dying, and people are dying because, well, lots of reasons, but one of them is they're locked up without their drugs. They get out, they're gonna do their fucking drugs,
right.
and like with a vengeance, right?
Definitely. Yeah, I
So,
know plenty of heroin addicts, and they are definitely into it. Though, if depends on what system you're in, there are drugs in prison.
well, sure,
So if it depends on who you are and how connected you are, whether you can keep your high going throughout the whole time you're incarcerated.
yeah, but I mean that brings up a whole other,
A
right?
whole
Because
nother, yeah,
it's
right.
like, where are those drugs coming from, right? I mean, like it's even
Yeah.
more terrifying.
Uh, it's ugly penal system that is all about money. And from the people I know that were incarcerated, you can buy anything you want as long as you know where to get it and where, and they know how to get it in, and they buy the guards, they buy everything. It's not that hard. It's way
Right,
worse than you would ever imagine.
right. I did have a friend who was in prison in Thailand for drugs. And his whole thing was, okay, they potentially want to put me away from life, right? And I'm finding more drugs in the prison here in, Bangkwang than I was, anywhere in Bangkok,
Right.
right? So he got really lucky. Um, Basically a slap on the wrist. I think he spent like 3 months. Um, but in his words, the amount of drugs in there was, 100 times what he would find in the
Right.
streets of Thailand.
Yep. It's an ugly world. It's an ugly world.
It is. So this is a great segue, Michael. Let's talk about your new band because that is not an ugly outcome of the world.
Oh yeah, old guys still rock.
Well, fuck yeah. I mean,
Yeah. Of course, I'm the only old guy in the band. The other guys are youngsters.
but see, that actually sometimes works even better, right? Because
Oh yeah, it's awesome.
yeah, you can give them the direction, right? Whether implicitly or explicitly.
Right.
And, one of the best shows I've probably ever seen um, was the Psychedelic Furs about I don't know, 5 years ago, I guess.
Right.
And the Butler brothers had fired everyone and brought in like three super young, like early 20s guys, right, to back them.
Right.
It was fucking incredible, right? Because they
Right
were
on.
still rocking it, and these young kids brought in this energy that, you know, it was different, right? Like it shook the whole thing up.
Oh, it's fun. I love playing with the young guys. They're me, but the they're so into the music that I played in the past. They both know of my music from the past, and
Hmm.
they're like, "Fuck, this is awesome. We love playing this."
That's great.
It's really fun, and a record. It turned out pretty damn good, I think. And Jamie Hillier at Module Overload Studios is a great producer and a great knob spinner. Uh,
Hmm.
I enjoyed him more than I liked working with Jack and Dino.
Wow. Okay. Well, that's a tall order. Although, it's funny when I named this podcast, Curmudgeon Chat, Indina was kind of in the back of my mind, right?
Right.
Like, I mean, he's
He was always a curmudgeon, even back then.
yeah, exactly, right. And now it's 30 some years later, and he's, you know, um, I actually got to work with him about 4 years ago, um, because I was doing some work with a band. I'm not going to mention just because I always get in trouble when I do, but I was doing some work with them, and he liked it so much when he was recording it, he joined the band. So
Oh,
he then
awesome.
became a member of the band. And they did some awesome work, like incredible work, whatever.
Oh yeah,
Um,
Jack's he's great. He did great work. I'm not dogging him by any means,
oh no, I
and I
didn't
love
think you
seeing
were.
him. Yeah,
Yeah, I didn't think you were at all. Um, but the story I like to tell is like walking into his studio, and you know, been in a lot of studios. Generally, there's a lot of bullshit that happens, behind the board, right? Like, people talking and like, being animated, whatever. Um, in Jack's place, I basically just sat and just watched him, right? I
yeah,
didn't say shit, like, oh, what about, no, just watch him work, watch him work,
yeah,
you know? And he's funny because it's like, what's a mouse, but yet he's like, he's he's doing his Pro Tools like like by rote, right? Like he knows the shit inside and out.
right.
But you probably wouldn't say, like, hey, dude, here's a cell phone. Join his Zoom meeting, right? Like, I mean, he
Yeah,
would probably never figure that out,
no.
but he's
Chris
a master
Hansick,
on that.
Chris Hansick was who was his partner at Triangle Studios back in the day.
Hmm.
He's really joined the modern age. We went and worked. on the reissue of the Blood Circus stuff. And he's got it down. He's got a big, gigantic 3-computer system
Yeah,
that he just goes crazy with.
yeah. Chris actually was my third interview
Oh
because
yeah, he's a great guy. I love
no,
him.
he's a sweetheart,
Yeah.
and he's still like keeping all that shit alive, man. Like he's probably the cheapest master studio anywhere. You know, like
And really good at it.
yeah, phenomenally good.
Right.
And we talked a little bit about his mastering process, and it's like sometimes, yeah, I just listen one time. Like I'm literally doing my masters as I go because his ear is trained that way, right?
Yeah.
And that's not common, but you know, he's able to do it enough that sometimes he can actually master an album in almost real time, right? Which is incredible.
Yeah. Yeah. He came over to Vashon to record my band on Vashon, and he was amazing the way he was able to do the work right there in our practice space, and he had all the microphones, and he had his computer, and what he was able to take from those recordings and then do in his studio at home up in, I think it's Woodinville, I think is where he's at, somewhere around
Monroe.
there. In Monroe, that's where it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, even worse.
Yeah. Exactly. Exactly. Um, so speaking of that Blood Circus album, are you guys planning on doing anything more, or is that basically it? Like, is there anything else in the can?
I don't know, to be honest. There may be some more stuff in the can, but I think that's probably going to be it unless we do some more recording, and we might do that, but I don't know. I'm pretty into the Vashon Seed, and I'm enjoying this. We're
Hmm.
we're already working on our second record, and I think I'm going to continue with this. This is where I'm at now.
No, I got that. I got that. But there's nothing like hidden in the vault, like, unreleased recording somewhere.
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. You
Huh?
know the hype, the live recording of Hype on the Hype album or the
Mm-hmm.
movie. There's a full recording of live material there.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if we could ever get a hold of that or not.
Well, I bet you can.
Yeah.
I bet you can. Um, who is Adam Pope?
Adam Pope.
He did the
Um,
the cover art for the album. I believe that like the and I actually have a copy of it, but I've never listened to it because I don't have a CD player. So I
which
actually
one?
bought it.
The Deadbeats?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Oh no, that's Adam Casto,
Okay,
and
I'm
he
sorry.
also
Yeah, yeah. Sorry.
does the work for the Vashon Seed too.
Oh,
Uh,
perfect.
he,
I love his
he's
artwork.
done artwork for my tattoo too.
Oh, that would be incredible. And
Oh,
he's like in he's
he's
like
in
in
he's in
Cincinnati, right?
Cleveland.
Cleveland, yeah.
Cleveland.
Huh.
Yeah, he's been a Facebook friend of Jeff's, and then I became friends with him, and he actually introduced me to Russell, the bass player that's in the Vashon Seed.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
That's great. That's great. Um, I mean, I was hoping you were going to say there's, some, unreleased Blood Circus stuff that's coming out, but
There could be, I don't know. Jeff is in charge of that stuff. He's in charge of the archives.
well, I mean, that's fine.
Yeah.
But for the time being, Vashon Seed is pretty fucking incredible, and I'll make sure to link that so that people can actually find it.
Oh, excellent. Excellent.
Yeah. Um, do you? I only have a couple more questions because for those who are watching or listening, I completely fucking forgot this interview was happening. So this is kind of like a seat of the pants sort of thing here.
That's
Um,
okay. We can hammer.
yeah, I mean, fuck, it doesn't matter. Um, That's basically how life gets when you get older, right? Like everything is like,
Mhm.
oh, okay, just do it.
Yeah, sure.
Um,
Why not?
so I forgot what I was going to say. Something about Vashon Seed. Anyway, great band. And
I'm glad you like it.
def yeah, definitely worth a listen. Um, and again, to those who don't know, if you haven't heard Blood Circus, gotta listen to some Blood Circus, right? Because it was Michael. The way I've always described it to other people is it was kind of like when you listen to some of the other bands from that time period, 86, 87, 88, somewhere in there.
Right.
Um, there was a heaviness, but it always seemed a little bit forced, right? And
Right.
like you guys, I remember like the first picture I saw you guys, and I think it, wa- it was either the Rocket, yeah, probably the Rocket, and you were outside of some little bar in Georgetown, right? Some little tavern, whatever. And it was
Right.
like, you know, and I remember thinking like, who the fuck are these guys? Like, that's so weird. Like, who the fuck goes to Georgetown? And like this is your home little bar, right?
Oh, we loved it. It was a great place to grow up. The band it is, that is.
Yeah. It. I mean, Georgetown hasn't changed that much, actually. I mean, it's changed, but certainly not the same as other areas of Seattle, right?
Right.
And you still have these little weird, restaurants and bars that they kind of exist in a bubble there. Um, but what I was really going to get at is you guys were tough. Like you looked fucking tough, right? You didn't look like you weren't posing for a picture. You guys were basically like, "Hey, we're out here to have our drinks." Or I'm sorry,
Well,
we're out here. We have to get back in the bar to have our fucking drinks. So just leave us alone.
right. Let's get these pictures over with.
Yeah, yeah.
No, you're not far from it. We did it for fun. We enjoyed it a lot, and we were a little more rough and tumble. I mean, Jeff was in the Navy for a long time, and I'm kind of a old hockey player, so we were fun guys.
So when when you were doing all that stuff, sorry, um, there was so Seattle is weird to me. There was a aura of violence that kind of hung over things, but to be honest, the majority of people have been, you know, pussies, right? I mean, for
Right.
for the most part. Um, and you guys actually seemed like if you were in a brawl, it would be like, no, we're gonna fight until we either win or die, right?
You mean when we were actually in brawls?
Right. Well, okay, yeah, which I'm sure happened. You know, it's oh my God, I'm gonna get this wrong, but there's the case of somebody chasing, uh, and this is not Seattle, it's in Hollywood, but some bad chasing Motley Crue down the street, like trying to beat the shit out of them, right? And Motley Crue is like, "We're gonna stand up, we're gonna fight," and well, I mean, good for them, but they got their fucking asses handed to them, right? Because it was like, you know, a band that really knew how to fight, taking them down. Um, and I have a feeling you guys would have pretty much pummeled most, if not all, of the bands during that period.
Oh, I've got stories to tell.
Well, that's what this is all about.
Right. Well, let's see. I can think of one real quick because I've got to get back to work here pretty
Hey,
soon.
no problem, man.
Yeah, I'll give you a quick one. We were in Montreal, and a bunch of skinheads were hassling this lady. Her name ended up being Emmanuel, and we ended up giving them a few whacks and running them down the street and taking that lady out for some beers.
Nice. That's nice. So you got like 2 more minutes?
Sure.
Literally two. Um, so they did let you out on tour. So Sub Pop,
Yes, they
despite
did.
being the worst selling band on Sub Pop, apocryphal, they did let you out on tour.
Yeah,
And
numerous times.
well, that's good. That's good. You guys, you went overseas at some point?
No, we never made it back. We were gonna go with Nirvana when we got back from our big national tour, and the band just kind of collapsed in the last week of the tour, so we couldn't go. But
Mm.
we were gonna go with Nirvana to that probably would have been good because I probably would have killed Kurt. Him and I didn't get along at all.
Well, I could see that. I mean,
Yeah.
for many reasons, I can see why. I think more is one of them is that you're very real, and I think Kurt, who I didn't know, so I'm kind of talking out my ass, but um, was not necessarily right.
No.
So
Yeah.
yeah, and my theory, Michael, and this is a great way to end it here. All right, so my theory is that the reason that Sub Pop is, and again, quote, the worst selling band on Sub Pop is that it was too authentic and it scared the fuck out of people.
Could be. Could be.
That's my theory. Um, with that, brother, let's wrap this up. And I actually would love to have you back on and talk about some other stories at some point.
Oh, anytime you want. That'd be fine with me.
All right, man. Hey, thank you so much for coming on and enjoy the rest of your day.
And thank you for your support.
Hey, thank you, man. Bye.